Hello and welcome to another episode of the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. We are here live on Twitter and YouTube at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, October 13th, as we anxiously await the start of the college basketball season. We are just 21 days away as we record tonight's episode. And again, if you are watching live, either on Twitter at BRamseyKSR, please make sure you give me a follow and feel free to hop in to the comments. Or if you're watching via YouTube on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball YouTube channel, make sure you're subscribed to the channel already and certainly leave this video a like, and also hop on in to the comment section, whether you just want to say hi, whether you have a question as we go through today's show, you want to bounce some feedback off of me as we go through today's topics. All of that is certainly fair play and why I enjoy doing these episodes live. So please feel free to hop into the comments as this show rolls along. For Big Blue Nation, this will be one that you are interested in. We're primarily going to be kind of reacting and breaking down Kentucky's recent NBA Pro Day that they did in front of all 30 NBA teams and multiple executives and scouts from each program. It's an annual event that Coach Calipari started. That was this past Wednesday, I believe. And then on Saturday, they hosted annual Big Blue Madness. Typically that's on a Friday. This year they took advantage of the football bye week and did it on a Saturday at Rupp Arena, but still an excellent event. A few surprise guests that got some people excited. And we're going to be talking about both of those big events here in today's episode of the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. We're going to start back with the Pro Day event, and it's a typical Pro Day showcase sort of thing. Now, are we going to sit here and get into the weeds a little bit of some of the things we saw? Absolutely, because that's what we do here at the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show. But are we going to have these big sweeping takeaways and, really throw the hammer down in terms of big picture thoughts taken from either one of these events? Absolutely not, because obviously there are events that are catered towards putting the players in successful situations, and for a lot of it, it's kind of for the fans. It's for effect. It's for promoting the program. It's for kind of good vibes going in to 2025, 2026. So it can be really hard if you want to put on your coach's hat, get out the chalkboard and do a bunch of X's and O's breakdowns or big picture takeaways going into the season. That can be very hard to accomplish from these sort of events. Even the blue-white scrimmage, which is coming up this weekend on Friday, that's even, it's still an inter-squad scrimmage that doesn't really count for anything. So even though it's a real basketball game played against the defense and everything, even it's a little bit hard to draw big picture takeaways from. So we're not going to do that with these events, but there are, some things stylistically or certain players that you can start to, at least build a little bit of a basis for what we might be seeing over the course of this winter as Kentucky gets into the 2025-2026 season. And where I want to start with this Wildcats team, especially because it's a area that admittedly, myself included, may have a slight worry about going into this season, and that's with the way they shoot the basketball and especially the quick trigger that we saw at the Pro Day. Now, again, I'll preface it one more time. It's easier to have a quick trigger when whether you make it or miss it doesn't really matter a whole lot. It's not going into a box score anywhere. It's not affecting whether you beat Louisville in early November. It doesn't affect whether you go on the road and beat Tennessee during SEC play. These are reps, essentially. And, I always use this example because it's true early in the year when Kentucky plays Bellarmine or somebody like that, and they start the game 3 for 3 from 3. I always liken it back to something I talked about a lot when I was coaching, and you'd be in a practice and you have your top 5 guys out there in shell drill, and you have your walk-ons or a couple of your managers or whoever it may be playing offense, and the guys got to get 2 or 3 stops in a row before they get out of the drill. Well, lo and behold, you can pretty much set your watch to it. The walk-ons, the end of the bench guys, the managers, whoever it may be, the practice squad players, whatever you have, they just start raining in threes one after another. And why is that? They're not that good of players. Well, there's no consequences, and it's a lot easier to shoot when you don't have any consequences. And even though you have a million NBA eyes on you, yeah, it's a little bit easier to, let one rip with some confidence from the volleyball line because make or miss doesn't mean as much. So again, I'm just kind of prefacing that for all these takeaways, but I was very impressed with the quick trigger and the range that these shooters seemed comfortable shooting with during Kentucky's pro day a few days ago. I thought that you saw them the immediacy with which they would shoot when a defender went underneath a ball screen or handoff, or if somebody was late chasing you off of a curl cut, or we saw it a couple of times. Even it was kind of a simple like away exchange. Andrea Jelovic hit a deep three off of just kind of a perimeter exchange where his man kind of went a little bit too far underneath, gave too much ground, closed out short, and Jelovic sprayed it in from the volleyball line. And I think that seeing that confidence, it tells you two things. One, Coach Pope really wants these guys to let it fly this season, and I think that two, you're probably going to see them maybe really push for that volume a little bit more than they even did last year. I think that last year, because you had a couple truly elite shooters, Kobe Bryant making 90 plus threes at nearly 50%, Jackson Robinson making 70 plus threes at a high percentage, guys like that. Last season, there was kind of an efficiency to the three-point shooting. I mean, that's why they finished top 15, 20, whatever it was in three-point percentage. I don't think that this team is going to do that, but as I've mentioned several times in this preseason, is I do think they can approach similar made three numbers across the board. Nobody's going to make 93s like Kobe Bryant. Honestly, probably nobody's going to make 60 to 73s, even like Jackson Robinson, because can this team have a bunch of guys that make between 30 and 63s? Absolutely. And I think that's why that volume number, because the percentage might be more like 34 or 35%, and I would sign up for that in a heartbeat. I think that you're going to see them really push that volume. And that means you have to be okay with Andrea Jelovic shooting it when he's open. Even a guy like Brandon Garrison, you have to let him shoot it when he's open. Mo Diabate is going to, he's going to squeeze a few off when he's open. Denzel Aberdeen, all these guys are going to have to be aggressive. And then obviously the guys like Trent Noah, Colin Chandler, Cam Williams, guys are probably going to have to shoot it all at B Ramsey KSR on Twitter moniker. Like obviously those guys are going to need to shoot all of them that they can. But these other guys, like you're going to have to be okay with living with some a lot of one for three nights, because we'll sign up for five of those guys going 1 for 3 every night. That'll be excellent for Kentucky shooting. But I was really impressed with the range. I was really impressed with how aggressively they were on every catch, thinking about shooting the basketball from wherever they were on the court. And like I said, I thought the awareness, and again, I think that's something that you can pick up on in these little scrimmage live periods from events like this is, are you reading the defense in real time, even if it's maybe 90% rep speed instead of 100% in a game? Even at 90%, are you able to recognize like, hey, my guy went under the screening action, I need to come off and shoot this thing? Or was my guy a little bit lazy on that perimeter exchange? Is he a little bit short? Should I go ahead and shoot this thing? Kentucky was kind of perfect on picking up on those intricacies in terms of when they're cutting and moving around the perimeter. And I thought that was impressive from the pro day. On the other side of things, outside of the live action, and I don't think these numbers were made public in terms of like what everybody's vertical was, what their shuttle run was, what their three-quarter court sprint was. But Colin Chandler and Denzel Aberdeen were the stars of each of those events. And I think they pretty much won all of them across the board. Those guys are freak athletes. And on a team full of, high-level athletes, obviously, Denzel Aberdeen and Colin Chandler stand out above the rest in terms of that NBA testing that Kentucky went through at their pro day. So just something to note. I don't think that necessarily shocks anybody. I mean, we saw Colin Chandler's elite athleticism from day one last season. It's what makes his ceiling so darn high and why we're so excited about him as Kentucky fans going into his sophomore season. Then Denzel Aberdeen, I mean, just look at the dude and you can kind of see why he's winning a lot of these events. He's the guy that looks the best getting off the bus. He's got a chiseled upper body. He's strong, but he's also so explosive and kind of wound tight with that quick twitch sort of reaction. And I'm really excited to see how just their pure athleticism causes some opponents problems this season. It's going to be a much, much more athletic team than we saw in Lexington last season. And that's just one of many reasons why I do think that this Coach Pope team in year two will be a step above of the 2024-2025 team. A couple guys that really stood out individually, and I think that we had obviously we've obviously heard a lot of these rumors. If you're a member of KS board and you get the practice intel from Jack Pilgrim, if you just follow things closely on Twitter or whatever it may be, you've heard, hey, Trent Noah is a lights out shooter. Like this guy it's going to be hard to keep him off the floor. You've heard this Malachi Moreno dude is a freshman. He's kind of looking like a McDonald's All-American. He's going to come in and he's going to force himself into the rotation, especially while Jaden Quaintance is out. We've heard a lot of these things, but for the overwhelming vast majority of us Kentucky fans, Pro Day was the first time to really see these guys on the floor at all. And I think they both kind of checked those boxes of like, all right, this wasn't media propaganda or, inside sources kind of putting out what everybody wants to hear. No, it was all true. Trent Noah has slimmed down. He's more athletic. He moves better. He just looks better on the basketball court, quite frankly. And he is making shots at the level of which we're being told he's making shots every day in practice. I know Coach Pope mentioned that in live action to this point, he's scoring something insane like 1.76 points per possession. I don't know if anybody sat down and statted the live periods during Pro Day, but I believe it because the dude's making shots at a high clip, and he does still bring some of those other kind of innate factors where he does have a knack for just being in the right place at the right time. I think he plays with a high basketball IQ, good understanding of team concepts, both offensively and defensively, and that certainly makes him even more valuable. And I think that, especially with if you want to buy into any of the shooting concerns with this team, then you probably are buying stock in Trent Noah playing even more minutes because he's probably going to be one of the guys that are one of the best shooters on this team. I still admittedly come at that with just a little bit of pause because he ended up playing a decently big role in a lot of the games down the stretch last season, and he shot 33.3% in the game. So I do still want to see it translate to the big time college basketball games as a sophomore before I fully let myself run wild with what Trent Noah can become. But you got to do it in practice before you can do it in the games. And he's doing that right now. So he is absolutely doing what he needs to be doing right now to earn some minutes. Malachi Moreno, same thing. I was admittedly, had a little bit of pause. Like, all right, like I've seen this guy play a ton in AAU with Indiana Elite. So I'm playing high school, so I can play up close and personal with the Kentucky All-Stars. And I always felt like he was an excellent rebounder. Felt like he was an excellent rim protector and defender. I thought he had some skill as a passer and sort of, being able to handle it and hand off actions and get actions and ball screen stuff offensively. But I honestly thought he was going to be very, very far behind offensively. He was kind of weak with the ball inside, didn't have a whole lot of skill with his back to the basket. Like, this guy looks good on the roll. He looks good on the rim run. He looks good at the dunker spot. Is he going to be a guy that you throw it to him as a freshman and ask him to score it on the low block? Absolutely not. But he was excellent as a passer at Pro Day. Like I said, he looks athletic and fluid on the roll, which he is. He looks athletic and fluid on the rim run, which he is. And then he is advanced defensively. The way that he reacts to things. Like, there's a couple of times, it kind of looks like when you're coaching and you're doing breakdown stuff and 5-on-0 or whatever defensively, the way that even just on a simple baseline drive, he drops low and goes and meets the guy outside of the paint, gets him before they get to the block, and he's there with two hands up, putting his championship chest, as Coach Pope would say, into that guy and cutting him off before he gets to the rim, before he gets into the paint. There's little things like that I really picked up on watching Pro Day back, and I think that I've had a lot of segments on KS Board, on the Brady Ramsey College Basketball Show, on different shows that I've been on across the state and across the country, kind of doing what sometimes is my job and being a little bit of the wet blanket across BBN and saying, hey, yeah, we got 14 really talented dudes on this team. Guess what? Only 10, maybe 11 of them are playing meaningful minutes. I don't know who they're going to be. I don't care who they are, but you're going to have to pick 3 or 4 names that don't play very much. Is that Trent Noah? Again, I don't know. I don't care. But if it's not Trent Noah, then does that mean it's Jasper Johnson? Does that mean it's Cam Williams? Does that mean it's Colin Chandler? Again, I don't know. I don't care. From Malachi Marino's standpoint, like everything we just said about him, if he's getting minutes, then who's not? Is Andrei Yelovich not getting some minutes? Whatever it may be, so it's going to have to be. Does he completely pass up Brandon Garrison, who we're going to talk about a little bit later? I don't know, but what we saw from Trent Noah and Malachi Marino are making a lot of these discussions even more interesting going into the season because they're probably towards that bottom end of the minutes spectrum with another guy like Braden Hawthorne, who what I wrote down while watching Pro Day was most, and I put in all caps, most college basketball programs would love to have Braden Hawthorne as a freshman. And he's most likely Kentucky's 13th man this year. Again, the conversation that I just had applies to Braden Hawthorne too. If you think he gets minutes, great, good for him. He might earn them, but that means somebody else isn't getting minutes. And one of the things, I'll say it again here on this platform, is we have about 200 people watching live right now. Just because you are good enough to get minutes doesn't mean that you are good enough to actually earn those minutes. I'll kind of pause and say that again. Just because in theory you're good enough to play in the games doesn't mean that you deserve or that you will play in the games. Because if you're the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th guy, we just don't have room for you. Think back to last season as the perfect example as a Kentucky fan. Travis Perry and Trent Noah and Colin Chandler to some extent too. Those guys proved down the stretch that, like, hey, we're good enough to come in here and do a serviceable job and beat some people as end of the bench pieces when they were thrust into larger roles, forced into larger roles due to injury. But before those injuries happened, they weren't playing meaningful minutes in the basketball games. Trent Noah and Travis Perry were almost always DNP coach's decision, and Colin Chandler was getting very, very few minutes in those meaningful big games, if not being a DNP himself. So again, whoever the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th guys are on this Kentucky team doesn't mean they're not good enough to, in theory, play in the games. It just means that they're not in the rotation. And having that depth, in my opinion, is a luxury. But it's going to make that conversation about who doesn't play in the games even more interesting this season. We're getting a pretty good log of comments here, so I want to take a minute to get into those. Big Blue Ball Knower says, you think the defense will really be top 5 to 10 like projected or worse? I think to win a title, they need to be up there defensively. I'll say this, and I said this, I think, on the Southeastern 16 Kentucky preview that I was on recently over on the Southeastern 16 YouTube channel. Go check those guys out. They do a great job. I said it like this. If Kentucky is a top 5 to 10 defense in college basketball, then I think they are a legitimate Final Four, top 5 team in the country. That's not to say I don't believe that they will, because I do think that the upside is there for that, because I think Jalen Lowe can be more disruptive than what people think on the ball. I think that Otega Owe will be improved defensively this year and be a real havoc creator. Denzel Aberdeen has a chance to be a really high-level perimeter defender. Andrei Yelovich, something I always kind of remind people about him, he averaged 7.6 and 7.4 rebounds to lead his team for 2 seasons in the Adriatic League. So that's a really good rebounder. I don't know if he's going to block a ton of shots or be great. It's kind of traditionally defensively, but ending possessions with a rebound is a big part of that. And he's going to sneakily be one of the best rebounders on this team. And then we know the anchor of it, if and when he's healthy, is going to be Jaden Quainitz, who could be the best interior defender in all of college basketball this season, not to mention kind of the Swiss Army knife of Mo Diabate, who certainly deserves to be mentioned here as well. So do I think they'll actually be a top 5 to 10 defense? I mean, I don't know. I can't really say that today, but I am going to say that if they do play out to be that, then this team is going to be everything and probably even more than what we can imagine, because I just believe that much in Coach Pope on the offensive end that will take care of itself. Benjamin Bush 7884 says, this strikes me as a streaky shooting team. Maybe they'll press more on off shooting nights. Coach Pope's already teased some of the pressing, and he did it a little bit last season, mixing in out of timeouts, after free throws, different things like that. And especially with the depth, I could see it being a bigger part of what they do this year. I don't think it's ever going to approach more than being maybe 5% of possessions or something like that. But I think if you do, press on 5-6% of possessions, it can really help you. And again, with the depth of this team, and I think it's probably fair to say that this team will be streakier again, because I don't think that they necessarily have that one, like, whoa, this is a top 15 shooter in college basketball this season. I think that Cam Williams and Trent Noah minutes providing probably the closest to that, those guys that could approach making 50 to 63s. But then a lot of those other guys, yeah, you're probably going to have games where Colin Chandler goes 1 for 8, and you're going to have a game where he goes 5 for 8. Jalen Lowe, he's going to have games where he goes 1 for 8. He's going to have games that he goes 4 for 7. Brandon Garrison's going to have a game where he misses his first 2 and probably doesn't look to shoot again. He's probably going to have a game where he goes 2 for 3 and helps us win a game. Maybe Andrei Yelovich in that boat as well. So I do agree. You could probably see this team being a little bit more streakier from beyond the arc. At Mr. Zenagame on YouTube says, with how competitive JQ seems, he has to be going crazy watching all this go down. I don't think he spends a second of his day with her without a basketball in hands. I really noticed that at Big Blue Madness too. Coach Pope, I think, had joked at some point about how he's been taking a basketball to class with him sometimes, and then here he was walking out of Big Blue Madness with the basketball in his hands. I think he is probably going crazy a little bit, but I think that's also probably part of why he's so kind of insanely far along this progress as he is because he's taking his rehab so seriously and so competitively, to use your word. And yeah, it's probably going to be a battle with, this isn't any inside information or anything like that. It's just kind of having a brain and knowing how things work. But yeah, that there might be a battle to be had between Coach Pope and JQ and his team, or some people around him that maybe want to be more cautious with bringing him back. Because as I've said, I think there's going to be 2 very distinct dates. The first date that Jaden Quainitz could play in a basketball game this season, because I'm not so sure that's going to be much beyond the first game of the season. And the second date is when Jaden Quainitz will play in a basketball game this season. I'm going to assume that's after the first game. It could approach Christmas or New Year. But, how closely those 2 dates end up lining up, I think Jaden Quainitz's competitiveness could help bring those 2 dates together a little bit. Thanks, Tanner, for the thumbs up. Benjamin Bush talks about JQ being anxious. Hawthorne will be great next season. High ceiling. Yeah, his ceiling is as high as anybody's, without a doubt. Big Blue Balner has another question. I think it'll be Potter, Hawthorne for sure, then Yelovich and Malachi that start to miss out on some minutes once JQ is ready. I think that's certainly the probably the easiest way to go. It certainly makes the most sense. With what you said there, that still is going 11 deep, which is tough to do, and really tough to manage. And I think that I don't want to dive too much into it on today's show. I'll probably save it for another time. But I do think it'll be one of the interesting things to follow is does the depth and managing that depth almost become a little too much for Coach Pope? Not that he can't handle it, but does he end up feeling like he needs to play more people than he truly needs to, because your 10th and 11th guy are going to be darn good and they're going to, have earned the right to play some real minutes, but you can't let yourself do that at the expense of playing your first and second best players quite as much, because there's still going to be a drop off between like Otega Owe and Jalen Lowe and whoever, Trent Noah and somebody else, Jasper Johnson, at the bottom end of the rotation. So I think that's going to be very interesting to follow this season. I have a YouTube comment. How far you think Kentucky will make the NCAA tournament, and will they win the SEC conference this year? I don't want to make it too many bold claims on October 13th, because, again, we've really not yet seen this team for real on the court, but they absolutely have the talent on paper and what I believe that we'll see on the court to compete. I'll be disappointed if they don't finish in the top 4 of the SEC, which obviously means you're competing for the championship. And I'll be disappointed if they don't compete for a Final Four, quite frankly. I think that's what this team should do this season in a one-and-done tournament. I'm never going to say they should make the Final Four. They should win the championship. That's silly. in my opinion. But I think it's a second weekend team, and I think it's a team that if you flip the coin, as many times as not, they're really making that push to the Final Four. A couple other things I want to touch on quickly. We're approaching 30 minutes here already, which is a good thing. And I really appreciate all those comments. If you have more as I'm still going here, please hop on in and I will get to them. But I want to mention Jalen Lowe here because I realized the other day after watching Pro Day, and I put out a couple tweets just with some initial thoughts after I went back and watched the film and all that stuff. And I had two tweets that probably totaled 6, 7, 8 sort of individual thoughts. I didn't mention Jalen Lowe once, and he's the stinking starting point guard on this team and probably the second best player. He was named third team all SEC in the preseason today, and he looks like what we need him to look like so far. Again, that's very limited sample size in advantageous situations, but he's shooting the ball well. That's something I mean, if I'm confident in anything, if I'm willing to stick my neck out on anything going into this season, it's that Jalen Lowe is going to be a good three-point shooter. What does that look like? I think that looks like making 40 to 50 threes at around 35%. I just think that's what he's going to be this season. He's too good of a free throw shooter. The shot looks too good for him not to do that. And honestly, he was close to that as a freshman at Pittsburgh. Then he was just asked to do literally everything offensively as a sophomore. I watched, this isn't necessarily pertain to his shooting, but I think it gives you a general idea of just how many eyes were on him last year as a sophomore at Pittsburgh when he earned third team All ACC honors. I was watching some clips of a Pittsburgh game today from early in the season. I think it was like against VMI or somebody. So like obviously not a super quality opponent, but still somebody that came into the game with a game plan to guard Pittsburgh. And Jalen Lowe beats his man one-on-one. They essentially switch it on the drive. So he gets another man, is able to kind of get down towards the baseline and curl it back up underneath the basket like the little Gretzky or Steve Nash dribble there. And you see 5 defenders with their heads completely turned, staring at the ball, and probably 8 of the 10 feet were all collapsed into the paint because you just didn't have to worry about those other dudes. And it was funny because there was a graphic on the screen at the time that said Pittsburgh had missed 6 of the last 7 field goals. Jalen Lowe whips a beautiful pass out to a guy wide open from 3, bricks that one, so make it 7 of 8. And that was just kind of the story of Jalen Lowe's season at Pittsburgh last season. And I just think things are going to be so much more open for him this year. He's going to be able to make people pay when they go under the ball screens. He's not going to be asked to shoot ones where they don't go under the ball screens, quite frankly. He's not going to have to dot people up late shot clock and shoot some crazy step back from the volleyball line just to try to get some offense for Kentucky. He's going to have people making shots when he play makes and passes it out. Then he's going to be able to take higher percentage shots because he's not asked to do everything with the ball in his hands. But I think he looks really, really good to this point in the season. Another shout out to Cam Williams. He made multiple plays where I audibly said, wow. One of them was he blocked a 3-point attempt out on the perimeter. That was kind of a wow play from a length standpoint. He had a really slippery drive to the basket that he finished up around the rim that was impressive. And then obviously the way that he can shoot the ball is potentially, in my opinion, probably Kentucky's best shooter on paper. With all due respect to Trent Noah going into this season, I have a little bit more faith even still in Cam Williams because of what he proved at Tulane as a freshman this year. So I'm really excited to see what Cam Williams becomes. And then I'm going to keep beating the drum. If Jalen Lowe being a good 3-point shooter is probably my number one thing that I'm sticking my neck out on this year, I'm going to keep sticking my neck out for my boy Brandon Garrison. I think that he looked really good in a couple of defensive rotations at the pro day, and I made this point almost from day one last year. I'll make it again this year, and it literally showed itself in the pro day. If I was more technologically savvy, I'd have the 3 clips loaded up right here for you. But there was a clip early on where he switched a ball screen. Kentucky didn't freak out. They didn't try to switch it back or anything. They just let him guard the point guard, and it was excellent. Think back to last year against Oklahoma. Brandon Garrison was probably the best individual defender on Jeremiah Fears that Kentucky had. So I am going. I really really like when Brandon Garrison is allowed to switch any and all action defensively because I trust him in those one-on-one situations. I also like him using his athleticism to hard hedge or blitz some stuff out beyond the perimeter. There was a clip of that from Pro Day. Then there was also a clip of him in this kind of softer drop coverage that we played a lot last year. He was kind of caught in between, a little bit in no man's land, and gave up a lob over his head. So it was sort of the normal dichotomy of Brandon Garrison, a couple amazing wow NBA player plays, and then a couple pedestrian like, man, I want more from you plays. But I do think that how you utilize him defensively is a really, really big part of how effective he is defensively. I also thought he looked a bit more patient and on balance around the basket at Pro Day. He would catch it instead of kind of getting sped up. I thought he, really showed the ability to survey the floor, make a couple moves, make a couple dribbles to the midline, and scored. He was just more on balance, wasn't traveling, things like that. I thought he looked good. A couple more comments here from Seth Pryor, 5046. Will Trent Noah ever get a chance to start, given he becomes the best option at the two, or is our best shooter always going to be a role player because he's not the loudest? Don't know exactly what that last point means, but I mean, I'll say it like this: if he's the best option, obviously he's going to get a chance to start. Do I foresee that happening? I don't know. I'm not sure how much Trent Noah is still going to give you outside of shooting. Now, could he continue to prove us all wrong along the way? Absolutely not. Do I think that his shooting is going to force him into the rotation this year? Absolutely. Could he be a starter as a junior or as a senior? We'll have that conversation when the time comes. But yeah, I mean, I think it's not like that somehow our best shooter is pigeonholed into being a role player. That's obviously not the case. And if that ends up being a Cam Williams, then he'll be in the same boat. But no, I think it's about, can those shooters give you more than quote unquote just shooting? And I think at times, like, even a Kobe Brea, or thinking back to Kellen Grady, different guys like that, like, yeah, it's awesome that you can shoot, but if you're a liability defensively, if you can't hit the ball, I'm not saying those guys couldn't, but or that Noah and Williams can't. But I just think that, yeah, you have to prove yourself you can be a starter in order to be a starter. It's not just about shooting the basketball. Big Blue Bartlower adds, fun hypothetical: who wins, Lamont, Ortega, Kobe, Card, Amari versus Lowe, Aberdeen, Ortega, Modi, and Garrison. I'll be honest, I'm taking this year's 5 pretty handily. I think you're better at a lot of those. I mean, I obviously draft Amari over Brandon Garrison. I guess you'd probably still take last year's Ortega over this year's Aberdeen. But otherwise, I like a lot of those guys on this year's side of that equation. So, yeah, I mean, I think this team's going to be better, and I think they're going to be better in a heck of a lot of different ways. So, yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Thanks again for all the comments. Really made today's show fun and interactive, a little bit easier to get through as well when I don't have to do all of the talking, or at least I can talk based on some of the things that you guys have to say. I'm going to be back on Wednesday for an episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We're going to talk about the preseason KenPom poll, preseason Bart Torvik, preseason Evan Mia, my personal preseason top 25. The AP poll came out today. We're going to break down a bunch of top 25 stuff, national preseason projections. That'll be Wednesday's show. That'll be live. I suspect at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time, but stay tuned for that. Have some scheduling things still to iron out for Wednesday. I'll be back on Friday, hopefully, with a film breakdown. I'll see if I can finish that up this week, and then I'll be in touch over the next couple of weeks. We have a bunch of conference previews coming your way. Those will all be with guests this year, getting those lined up as we speak. And over the next 3 weeks, a ton of good preview podcast content here on the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. So make sure you are subscribed. Also, a lot of written work on KentuckySportsRadio.com, getting ready to fire up some that already has my first of 5 storylines every 5 days leading up to the season. So you can check that out again on KentuckySportsRadio.com. And all of this, the YouTube channel, the podcast stuff, the written work, all of it gets promoted through my Twitter account at BRamseyKSR. So go give me a follow there as well. Thank you all for being here. Hope you have a great rest of your Monday night and a great week. Thanks.